Hey everybody, my name is Matt Ober. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called Pinata. Pinata is basically an NFT media storage and service platform. So, on the subject of NFTs, let's go back to the original NFTs of the world. We have physical art. So in the physical art world, when a piece of art is bought, that ownership transfer is very explicit. The person that is selling the art to the person that is buying the art knows that the person that is buying the art is going to be in charge of keeping track of that data and that art piece for the rest of its existence. So this is why we have pieces like the Mona Lisa that are still with us here today, is because when that art changes hands, it's very explicit. The new owner keeps it alive and existing for as long as it is deemed important. So NFTs, not quite the same thing. So in the NFT world, when an NFT is sold, the blockchain ownership of that NFT is transferred, but the media content for that NFT is not. So what does this mean? We have two parts to an NFT. We have the on-chain portion of it, and we have the off-chain portion of it. So the on-chain portion of an NFT is basically the NFT ownership history. Think, what is the NFT, who owns it, and then most importantly, a link to the media that that NFT represents. And then correspondingly, we have the off-chain component of it. We have the NFT media. This is going to be your image, your video, your music. This is kind of the big, large file that is associated with your NFT. So when that gets transferred, the data gets transferred when an NFT is bought, but the media itself is often not being transferred. So where does this leave NFT owners and purchasers? When you're buying an NFT, if that NFT data is moving to your wallet, but the media is not, that presents a little bit of a hard situation for you. So I'll liken this to, imagine you've just bought yourself a car, and you now own that car. You have the title for it, the records for it, but that car is now still sitting at the dealership. You're never going to drive it, you're never going to use it. The dealership is still kind of in control of the thing that you've just bought, even though you technically own it. This is kind of what's happening with NFTs right now. So I want to go through a few examples here of NFT ownership and transferring and how to do things the right way. So this is my coworker, Ashley. Ashley does a lot of great artistic things at Pinata, so we're going to use the example of Ashley creating her own NFTs. Let's say Ashley creates these, and she starts to sell them to people that are interested. So in the first scenario, Ashley has created her NFT, and she has put her content on like a platform like, let's say, Dropbox. So when you access content through Dropbox, you're going to get a link. So dropbox.com, Ashley's NFTs, and the ID for that NFT. This is a Web 2 URL that you are probably pretty familiar with in today's world. Let's do scenario 2. So scenario 2 is Ashley is going to put her art onto IPFS. And she does it with Pinata because she works at Pinata and we love Pinata. Instead of a URL, when Ashley does this, her art is going to be retrievable from what's known as an IPFS CID. It's a little kind of sequence of letters and numbers, but that ID is what represents the content itself. So, okay, in both of these scenarios, let's say after Ashley sells these NFTs, Ashley gets abducted by aliens. It's a very sad scenario. We don't want it to happen, but right, the worst has happened. Which of these two scenarios do you think the NFT owners that have purchased Ashley's NFTs are best protected? I'll give you a hint, it's the IPFS-backed NFT. So why is this the case? Well, let's start with the Dropbox scenario. So in the Dropbox scenario, Ashley has been abducted and she is no longer paying her bills. In this scenario, Dropbox is going to shut down Ashley's account because Ashley is no longer paying Dropbox to keep her content alive. So in this scenario, the NFT is now pointing to a dead link. So if you've ever gone to a web page and it just says, this does not exist, that's what's going to happen now when people are trying to view these Dropbox-based NFTs. So how does IPFS change this? To start with, I want to go briefly high level, kind of technical. We're going to take it very high level. When you upload content to IPFS, your media, your image, it goes through this cryptography magic and it spits out what's called a content identifier. This is the ID for your content. And then when you want it back, you ask this IPFS network, hey, does anybody have the content for this content identifier? And if somebody has it, you're guaranteed to get it back. Again, high level, there's a lot of cryptography magic that goes on behind the scenes here, but what you need to know is that you can provably retrieve this content as long as it's still being hosted. So I just said as long as somebody is still hosting it. This is really important. So similarly to the Web 2 world that we're working in, IPFS still requires somebody to be hosting this content. IPFS is not a magic network where it's just storing infinite amounts of data for free. Somebody has to pay for the data storage. In the blockchain world, things exist forever, but the reason that can happen is because you're working with very, very tiny amounts of data. So the economics are kind of built into the blockchain system itself. When we start to deal with higher size content like images and video, we can't do that. We can't replicate that on tens of thousands of machines because it would be absurdly expensive. So coming back to it, with IPFS, somebody still needs to host the content. And if nobody's hosting that NFT content, the NFT is still going to go offline. However, there's a silver lining here. Unlike traditional Web 2 hosting, such as say Dropbox or AWS S3 for the developers out there, with IPFS, users can then take control of their data and protect it from going offline. So it doesn't matter who's hosting it, as long as somebody is, it's always going to be retrievable via that same link. So let's go to the following scenario. Remember our good friend Ashley. Okay, Ashley got abducted by aliens. It was very sad. But let's say that Ashley, she uploaded her content to IPFS using Pinata. In this scenario, Ashley's hosting the content herself, and then she's also got an always online backup of that content that she's hosting with Pinata. In this scenario, there's two people hosting this content now. So if Ashley's node goes offline, once she has been abducted by aliens, the content is still online. Pinata is still serving that content. And it doesn't have to be Pinata. It can be multiple nodes that you host. It can be your friend. You can even just store it locally if you want to for safekeeping without hosting it online. But the important thing is, if you bring it online at any point, as long as somebody's hosting this content, the link is never going to die. Your NFT is never going to die. So in this scenario, again, the content lives. Somebody was hosting the content, even though it's no longer Ashley. You, as the NFT buyer that have purchased Ashley's content, when you bought that content, let's say you replicated it to Pinata or your local node, now you are the owner of that content and you're keeping it online, even though Ashley is no longer doing that for you. Okay, let's talk through a real life scenario here about how this played out in practice. Last year, there was a very large, prominent NFT platform that was luckily hosted on IPFS. This platform one day decided that it was going to shut down. There were millions of NFTs on this platform, and this instigated quite a crisis for a lot of the people that were using this platform. People were scared. They didn't know where their NFTs were going to end up, if they were going to still stay online. But luckily, like I said, this content was hosted on IPFS. And before this platform went fully offline, Pinata basically jumped in, and we copied over the entire collection of all of these NFTs onto our network before that platform went offline. So millions transferred over very quickly. And then at the end of the day, the content is still living. These NFTs are still working with no change in functionality. That link never died. And this is a really important example of how this type of NFT that you should be looking for can still live on. Okay, so what do you need to do to protect your NFTs as somebody that is buying NFTs? There's 3 important points that I'm going to talk about here. The first thing to do that you can protect your NFTs is, in the first place, buy NFTs that allow you to protect them, to take ownership of that data. So if you're buying an NFT that's hosted on Dropbox or some other random, web server, if that goes offline, you're out of luck. That NFT is going to be gone. Find NFTs that are hosted on IPFS. The second is make local copies of your NFTs. Just because the NFT is hosted on IPFS in the first place, remember what we said, if that goes offline, you're still kind of out of luck. So make those copies of your NFTs before that happens. We don't want to rely on luck to keep our stuff online. We want to be proactive here. And then lastly, if you want your content and your NFTs to be accessible, whether it's plugging into different applications or you just want to make sure people can always view the image, make sure that you have an always online copy of that NFT. I will obviously recommend Pinata for this. I'm a little bit biased, but you can do this in any sort of way that allows your NFT to be hosted on the IPFS network. Okay, secondly, buyers aren't the only participants here. As an NFT creator, you also have some responsibilities. Your first one is going to be, again, using an off-chain data storage solution that lets your users take ownership of that data. We recommend IPFS for this. And then secondly, ensure your data has that always online backup. So if you are hosting your content yourself, we recommend hosting your NFT data in multiple locations. Don't rely on the platform that you uploaded your NFT to. Don't rely on your desktop. Put it in multiple locations so that if something goes wrong, your NFT is still online. And then thirdly, this is really important. You need to educate your buyers, your purchasers of your content, how to take control of that data. So if you, like Ashley, get abducted by aliens, your users and your buyers can still have their NFT data, and their NFTs will still continue to exist and work. Okay, so thank you very much.